Ladies and gentlemen, our director, Professor Magdalena Gawin.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of all employees of Pilecki Institute in Berlin and myself, I welcome all guests to our 4th birthday and opening for the new exhibition dedicated to our patron, Witold Pilecki. The 4th birthday of the Pilecki Institute in Berlin is the reason to be proud. I remember the birth of the Institute, its beginnings, first successes, and development. The 4 years in Berlin, it was extraordinary time, not only for Poland, not only for Germany, but for the whole world. In 2020, we got news about deadly virus that came to us from China. We learned a new word, pandemic. The streets, squares, cafes, and restaurants in our cities were deserted. The costs of the pandemic were high, both economically and psychologically. When we finally began to win the fight against invisible enemy, the world could not return to its normal rhythm. On February 24, 2022, Russia attacked Ukraine. On our TV screens, we saw Russians' missile attacks, burning apartment blocks, and sufferings and drama of the civilian population. From then on, we witnessed Russian crimes almost every day and learned the name of the small town near Kiev called Bucha. In Poland, it was a period of humanitarian uprising. About 6 million Ukrainians crossed the Polish border to escape the war. Poles spontaneously provided help, from welcoming Ukrainians into their own homes, distributing food and medicines, and setting up temporary centers for refugees. The Polish government provided unprecedented humanitarian and military assistance. Poland was the first country to support Ukraine from the beginning and to convince doubting or hesitant leaders of other countries of the need for humanitarian and military assistance for fighting Ukraine. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki visited Berlin a few times and personally convinced Chancellor Scholz of the need to help Ukraine. When today we open the 2nd exhibition about Captain Pilecki, we are wiser and more experienced about this bloody spectacle of war. Together with this new experience, the question returned: the division into offensive and defensive wars, just and unjust wars. We saw the failure of the slogan about the end of history and pacifism and became convinced of the need to fight evil. After the outbreak of the war, the geostrategic map of Europe has changed, and we are witnessing the birth of a new order that will be able to face imperialism and aggression. Let's go back to the exhibition for a moment. Why do we still remember about Witold Pilecki and the Second World War? First of all, Pilecki is a hero of united Europe. He was born and fought in the heart of the bloodlands. He fought against Nazi Germany as a soldier of the Polish underground state and as a volunteer to Auschwitz-Birkenau. After the war, he was imprisoned and murdered by communists. It recalls basic values of which freedom is the main value, especially close to Poland and the nations of Central and Eastern Europe. So, dear all, at the end, I have a great pleasure to say thank you, all my employees here in Pilecki Institute in Berlin. I would like to say thank you, Anna Bobczuk, producer, manager, and co-curator of the exhibition, Rafał Ruciński. Yes! Rafał Ruciński, researcher and co-manager. Vera Franke, designer and for narration of the space. Doris Schemmel, texts. Christine Kita, graphic design. Thank you. Dr. Piotr Setkiewicz and Professor Johann Böhler for consultations. Furthermore, thanks to Kamilo Kuszel, Frank Steiner, Trick Track Studio, Sanne Jager i Łukasz Izer. Thank you very much. And last but not least, I'm very grateful to our friend Jack Fairweather, author of the book and co-curator with Hania Radziejowska of the exhibition. Thank you, Hania. And I'm very grateful Auschwitz-Birkenau Museum as a partner of the exhibition. Thank you very much.
This is Ambassador of Poland, Dariusz Pawlusz, please.
Sehr geehrte Frau Professor Gawin, sehr geehrte Frau Direktorin Radziejowska, liebe Hania, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Freunde des Pilecki Instituts in Berlin, liebe Freunde Polens. Ich möchte auch Herrn Gesandten der ukrainischen Botschaft hier recht herzlich begrüßen, Herr Maxim Jewlenianow, der hier auch anwesend ist, und meinen werten Kollegen, Herrn Botschafter der Republik Deutschland AD, Herrn von Loringhofen. Hallo. Vielen herzlichen Dank für die Einladung, insbesondere da wir anlässlich des 4-jährigen Bestehens des Pilecki Instituts in Berlin und der Eröffnung der Dauerausstellung Witold Pilecki im Widerstand gegen Hitler und Stalin hier zusammengekommen sind. Das interdisziplinäre Umfeld des Instituts als Zentrum für das Studium und die Erforschung von Totalitarismen ist ein lebendiger Ort der Erinnerung an die Versklavung Europas durch 2 unendlich böse und dunkle Regime des 20. Jahrhunderts. Der Nationalsozialismus und der Stalinismus versklavten die Köpfe und brachten das Böse hervor. Die Aufgabe des Pilecki Instituts besteht darin, die Erinnerung an die Geschichte und an die Menschen zu bewahren, die sich gegen das Böse und gegen die Versklavung gewehrt haben, da und dort gefangen waren, aber auch gekämpft und sich erhoben haben, um die Würde des Menschen, die Ehre des Vaterlandes und die Zukunft der Generationen zu verteidigen. Die gleiche Mission verfolgte auch Rittmeister Witold Pilecki in seinem Leben. Das nach ihm benannte Institut auf der Berliner Landkarte ist ein Teil der lebendigen Erinnerung der Polen an den Schmerzen, das Leid und die Verluste, die der deutsche Nationalsozialismus in Polen verursacht hat. Durch seine Person und Erfahrung ist es auch ein Zeichen der Erinnerung an die Jahre der stalinistischen Diktatur und eine Warnung vor den verschiedenen Erscheinungsformen totalitärer ideologischer Doktrinen. Die jüngste Geschichte zeigt, dass das Böse nicht zur Rechenschaft gezogen und durch Halbwahrheiten vertuscht, immer wieder auftaucht und mit der vollen Wucht der Zerstörung zurückkehrt. Das Wissen über die Geschichte ist die Grundlage für die Wiederherstellung der Symmetrie im Dialog und den Aufbau von Beziehungen Polens in Europa auf der Grundlage der historischen Wahrheit. Diese Aufgabe, diese Mission des Pilecki Instituts weckt meine Wertschätzung und große Hoffnung auf die Bewältigung von Herausforderungen in der heutigen Zeit. Das Pilecki Institut in Berlin agierte vom Zeitpunkt seiner Gründung an unter den äußerst komplexen, komplizierten politischen und sozialkulturellen Bedingungen der deutschen Hauptstadt. Die anfängliche Zurückhaltung der deutschen Politiker und später die Pandemie, von der Frau Professorin Gawin gesprochen hat, waren der breiten öffentlichen Tätigkeit des Pilecki Instituts nicht förderlich. Aber das junge und das dynamische Team des Instituts unter der hervorragenden Leitung von Hanna Radziejowska und Mateusz Wałkowski sowie der Aufsicht von Professor Magdalena Gawin konnte sich durch die Kraft der Motivation und das hohe Niveau des Angebots oft viel besser als die meisten lokalen deutschen Einrichtungen während des Lockdowns ins Netz einbringen und nicht nur im Internet, sondern auch im wirklichen Leben zu einem festen Bestandteil der wissenschaftlichen Einrichtungen, der Gedenkstättenlandschaft und des historischen Diskurses der deutschen Hauptstadt werden. Dank ihrer offenen und verantwortungsvollen Haltung wurde das Institut auch zu einem Treffpunkt für die belarussische Opposition und für die Ukraine. Wir bewundern das und wissen das zu schätzen. Diese Meinung teilt auch der polnische Staatspräsident Andrzej Duda, der sich hier, ausgerechnet hier, mit den jungen belarussischen Oppositionellen und den ukrainischen Geflüchteten vor einiger Zeit hier getroffen hat. Mit meinem Dank für Ihr Engagement versichere ich Ihnen, liebe Freunde, meine Wertschätzung und Unterstützung für Ihre Arbeit für Polen und seinen guten Ruf in Deutschland. Herzlichen Glückwunsch zu dem vierjährigen Jubiläum und vielen Dank für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. Ich habe auch ein kleines Geschenk für die Direktorin des Instituts.
Bei Geburtstag gibt es auch Geschenke. Ja, vielen Dank. So many thanks, Ambassador. So now Hanna Radziejowska, so the director of the branch of the Berlin branch of the Pilecki Institute.
Ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador Darku, for your very kind words. Yes, today we are opening a new permanent exhibition about our patron, Witold Pilecki, and we are going to celebrate our 4th birthday. And we have been working on this exhibition for 2 years. And I think it's good to explain that we were trying to understand also German audience, and that's why learning about Berlin and our German guests, and to make this exhibition as much as possible that our history, our way of thinking will be much more understandable. And this opening of the exhibition completes a process. 4 years of us being here and working hard, renovating and preparing all our institute spaces. It has been time, as our director mentioned, and a bit like this Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. We are living in extremely interesting, difficult times. And I was often reminded of a prophetic phrase from one of my favorite Vargas Llosa books: it can always be worse. And yes, pandemic, Russian aggression against Ukraine, persecution of the Belarusian opposition. And we have been working here in Berlin for 4 years to tell the Polish history, to build a space for education, for dialogue with our German friends, to tell the Polish perspective on the experience of the 20th century, on Polish history, on Polish culture, but also on this East European history and culture, so little known, unfortunately, among our German friends, German neighbors. We believe that history matters, that cooperation with our European German friend and ally makes sense. And we are also very Slavic, very Polish. We act according to the principles of this beautiful culture of improvisation. It means we work and react to what is happening around us. Together with my amazing, brilliant deputy Mateusz Fałkowski, we will want to shortly present and talk about these 4 years here. But first, I would like to share 3 reflections around our new exhibition and Witold Pilecki. So the first reflection is, well, there is an inscription in the Pawiak prison where the Gestapo tortured Polish prisoners, and it goes in this way. It is easy to speak about Poland. It is harder to work for her, even harder to die for her, and the hardest to suffer for her. And this sentence by an anonymous author really speaks to about the great mystery of the price of freedom. Because Pilecki's story is first and foremost a story that reminds us how much freedom, democracy, a free Poland and a free Europe cost. It often seems to talk about values in these old school terms that our grandparents fought so that we could be free. This seemed like an empty slogan. But it's like Timothy Snyder said not so long time ago, that he reminded that the future only exists if our world is based on values, freedom, democracy, justice, because it is theirs that give us the chance to choose, and choice means the future exists. This mystery of the causes and consequences of human choices, of the links between past and future, and therefore of decision-making and sometimes heroism, as in the case of Pilecki, is not a story about closed path, myths, and a culture of remembrance. It is a rethinking of history which matters because of values and opening up to the future. I recently listened to a debate in Kyiv with Ukrainian soldiers who explained that they fight so that their families and children, their friends and compatriots would never have to see what they see and experience, and so that they could be happy. Today, when there is a war in Europe and civilians and soldiers die every day, we suddenly begin to understand better what happened 80 years ago, and that our grandfathers and grandmothers said the same things, that they struggle and suffer, it was for us, and is also the source of our freedom. The story of Pilecki and his co-workers in the Home Army tells this bitter truth that there is no price for freedom. Freedom is priceless, and at the same time it is impossible to come to terms with the void left by those who gave their lives. This proximity of history gives us a chance to discover once again how much Pilecki is part of this Polish and European heritage, the struggle for freedom, democracy, true justice, free Poland, free Europe. Reflection 2. That the exhibition tells through Pilecki's biography about his bearing witness. He experienced German crimes and knew that he had to remember everything and bear witness to German and Russian communist crimes, to both totalitarian systems. His reports are part of that history, but his effort to remember and bear witness was linked to his decision to act in every situation and no matter what the circumstances, to refuse to accept evil and to do everything to fight. We can see how both totalitarian systems fought against history, how they were trying to erase our memory, how late we could discover these histories. The Pilecki report was first published in Poland in 2001, 10 years later in English, and then a few days later in Germany. Memory and history are part of democratic values, and now we can reclaim memory, and this exhibition is a part of this process. Third reflection. It is a little bit linked to this second reflection, and it's rather sad. Our exhibition shows Pilecki's effort to inform the world about German crimes and to stop them. He asks for the bombing of Auschwitz, he plans the uprising, he and many of his colleagues pass on information that the Polish government in exile makes public and tries to convince the Allies and the world that the crimes must be punished. In the exhibition, we see a shocking interview with another emissary of the underground state, Polish underground state, Jan Karski, who talks about his meeting with Roosevelt and his reaction to the information about Holocaust. He said, you know, it's so terrible that no one will believe it. In the exhibition, we see the great efforts of the Polish state, publications, conferences, initiatives, exhibitions that were supposed to raise awareness of the terrible crimes committed by the Nazi Germany. And we see the reactions, short articles in the Daily Telegraph or the New York Times, the 5th page, 11th page. And the reflection, such an obvious crime, so much material collected, evidence, testimonies, and the world was silent. And after the war, it was so difficult to punish the perpetrators. So that so-called second guilt of post-war Germany is the failure to punish the criminals. The German crew of Auschwitz, a gigantic death factory, and in the end, only 5% of all those who were responsible for these crimes were punished. Let this be a warning to us today when we see the Russian crimes in Ukraine, persecution of Belarusian opposition, that crimes without punishment and peace without justice must not be allowed. And in the end, I would like to ask Mateusz to help me to tell something about our institution, because today is our 4th birthday. But before that, I would like to ask for help because we would like to thank too many people. And first of all, I would like to thank Professor Magda Gawin, because she has established this institution, and she is like, it was her vision, her determination, and I must say I have never had such freedom. I thank you. we have many discussions, many argues, which are always starting point for further ideas. And I mean, Magda, we have flowers for you, but.
I am embarrassed.
Thank you very much. And this is first because you know, it's like hobbits, yes? We have birthday and we give presents. But now we would like to thank our team. Yes, and Mateusz, the floor is yours. And
do we start from the team of the exhibition or the team of the team?
The team of the team.
The team of the team. So maybe the first people we want to ask to come here are the people responsible for the really functioning of this house, of this institute, the people who found these premises on the Pariser Platz, who help us with bookkeeping and so on and so forth. So Jakub Świetlik, Ewa Drewnowska, come.
There are many
Ania Molenda.
Mikołaj Łuczyński. There are many gossips
Jakub.
There are many gossips how it happened that we are here.
So the Kuba Świetlik. So because we were asked at the beginning in 2019, we were asked, do you get this building from Angela Merkel? No, it was found on the market by Jakub Świetlik.
It's very difficult, but you know, I was buying these flowers, and they should be a little bit.
Ania Molenda, Ewa Drewnowska. Yeah, and Cuba. Yeah. And so the very organization of the functioning of the institute is thanks to people, not only to the administration, but also to Anka Bobczuk. Anka Bobczuk already mentioned. So Anka was instrumental for so many things. So the instrumental was responsible for the fact that we finished this exhibition. But not only for that. So the head of our production department, so the Anka Bobczuk, so the I don't know. So this is okay. Okay.
Kamila Szuba.
So Kamila Szuba is also our colleague from production. Anka, Kamila, all other people. Yes. So the very important for the Kamila Szuba, Kamila. So very important field of our activities are archives. So to be frank, so the archives was the very beginning of this institute. So we already we have a very good cooperation with Bundesarchiven and Landesarchiven, but of course, so this cooperation is possible only because of the wonderful work and this digitalization of the acts. Over 5 million documents already digitized related to the Polish history, taken from the German archives, and we wanted to build the infrastructure for journalists, for researchers, of course, to make research better, and easier. So Natalia Latecka, and Rafał Ruciński. Kamila, come. Kamila Szuba is here. Rafał Ruciński, Rafał. Yes. So then we have the people responsible for the beautiful Exercising Modernity program. Exercising Modernity program is already 5 editions. Małgorzata Jędrzejczyk is the head of this program, and Witek Okuń is another associate of this program. And I see also Karolina Głowińska. Karolina Głowińska is also responsible for our scholarships. So Małgosia Jędrzejczyk, Witek Okuń, and Karolina. So Karolina Głowińska. Then we have, so because I already mentioned this administration thing, but this administration thing wouldn't be possible without Adam Czerwin. Adam Czerwin is simply the very most important person in the institute. Adam and Piotr Kowalski. Adam, thank you. Then, because we have not so much time, but we have also, I saw already our colleagues from Vice, but one of these colleagues from Vice, from our Ukrainian friends, so from Ukrainian diaspora, is also working with us, Ewa Jakubowska, very, very important. So Ewa Jakubowska is responsible for the whole Ukrainian program of the institute, and so now I already mentioned about the most important persons in the institute, but there's also another the really most important person. He's Patrick Szostak. So Patrick Szostak. So without Patrick, we wouldn't manage. We wouldn't manage. Patrick is the
generally
really
without every of this person, amazing person, we would not manage.
So another story is the story of our education department. So this is something fascinating because the pandemic was already mentioned. The pandemic was in a way also a chance for us. A chance in what sense? So because all the big elephants of the civic education in Berlin, all the Zentrale für politische Bildung and other, so after the pandemic broke, they needed some time, so to think about what is possible, what is feasible, what is machbar, and so we didn't have enough time. We acted very soon. So the most important people, most important person, one person, another most important person in our institute is Alexander Klimiuk. Alexander Klimiuk is the head of our education department, but also many, so not so many. So there should a few people involved in the educational activities. So I saw Max Steinhoff, Claudia Broszeit. Lucas. So you will listen to Alexander, to Lucas, because after that there will be some guided tours through the exhibition in the basement, and they will be provided by Alexander and Lucas. Claudia is no Claudia Broszeit. Claudia. Okay. So this is.
I think still I would like also to thank very much to Konrad Woźniak.
Konrad Woźniak, Konrad.
Our also he started also to be a producer, because generally in our team sometimes it's very difficult to catch in which department someone works.
Konrad. Yeah. Konrad is archivist and in the archive department, but also he's the producer of the very last publication of ours. So this is the Sammlung von Comics. So the historische comics, and we will publish it. So we already published with which Verlag?
Avon Verlag. And I want to say, actually, I'm the wrong person to thank for this project, because I just set the finishing point, and the person actually responsible for it for 3 years was Grzegorz Tomczewski, and he is supposed to be mentioned here as well.
Thank you.
And I think we would like to thank Marek Kowalczyk, who is always here and supports our technical, all technical stuff, our online materials. Thank you very much, Marek. I have also for you the flower.
Okay, so I think it's. So there are only.
Now we would like to invite all our amazing creator of the exhibition, and we have also for you flowers. So Vera, Doris, Anka, Bobczuk.
So the sunflower for creators of exhibitions. So
Doris Szemel, Kristina Kita, yes, Anka Bobczuk. If you can come here, we would like to.
Yeah. So the information for the creators of the exhibition. So, Anka. So for photo opportunity for you. So many thanks once again. So you will see this effort and this effect in form of this exhibition. Marek, jak te slajdy tam tutaj puścić, bo... Okay, so the story is that we wanted to put our foot between the door and door frame. So to be in one time the Polish Institute, but also Berlin Institute. So we wanted to provide the Polish history, but not only the history of Poland, but we strictly believe in the history, that the history is connected to the history of the region. So in German you have some beautiful words as Verflechtung, Einbettung. So the history is entangled, as our friend Andriy Portnov said. So the entangled. So Andriy Portnov will be our next speaker, one of our next speakers. But altogether, during these 4 years, 350 different lectures, discussions, conferences, and so forth and so on. Another slide, please. We organized also other forms, so the exhibitions. Though this exhibition, about the first exhibition of Witold Pilecki, was primarily, originally thought as a temporary exhibition. Finally, we decided that we have one permanent exhibition, and we have also some place here. So for the Wechselausstellungen, for the changing exhibitions, and we organized more than a dozen exhibitions on such issues as Polish solidarity movement, also the protests in Belarus, also some exhibition devoted to Ukraine, also the exhibition which you can see now, so this Wechselausstellung zu Heinz Reinefahrt and the genocide of Wola. Next slide, please. Then we have, I already mentioned it, so the very, very important topic for our institute, very important field, so the digitization of archives. So this is this cooperation, Polish-German cooperation, which is really good, and we are proud of it, that in this form we provide to the next generation of scholars so the better access to the sources. Next slide, please. So I also already mentioned this education courses, so this work of our educational department, and also very successful, over 250 educational workshops and meetings. Next slide, please. So the 5 editions of Exercising Eastern Modernity. So it started...
Exercising Modernity is older than Pilecki Institute. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
This, because everything started from this program dedicated to Polish modernism, and this year will be 5th edition, and Dr. Małgorzata Jędrzejczyk is co-curator of that project. Yes. Yes,
and this is something which is also one of the faces of our institute. So the discussion about the modernity and also the good and bad sides of modernity is important feature of our way of thinking about the 20th century, about our work. Next slide, please. So we also have some scholarships we offer. So maybe I mention only the one type of scholarship for Belarusian scholars. So we think that it's important, vitally important, to preserve Belarusian culture and Belarusian identity, and we offer some scholarships for scholars who work on this issue. Next slide, please. Then, in space, you will be visiting after that. So the new exhibition on Witold Pilecki and Auschwitz. So after the February of 24th of February, we decided to offer these premises, to offer this space for the action of help for Ukraine. So, and great cooperation with Ukrainian partners emerged. Next slide, please. And altogether, we can mention one name in that context, in this regard. So the context is the persona of Jerzy Giedroyć. Jerzy Giedroyć was the intellectual and also, but somebody who combined both intellectual ideas with activity, agency with thinking. And I think this is also very characteristic also for Witold Pilecki, that he also combined being witness and being active man of action. And Jerzy Giedroyć's idea was that independent Ukraine and in also Belarus, so that he was born in Minsk, so that is vital for the future shape of Europe. I don't know, so is there any other slide? I think not. So many thanks.
Thank you very much, and I think that the last, expressing our thanks is to our audience. Thank you for your coming and being with us, because yes, I think these all moments of meetings, dialogues, it's for us, we learn a lot, and I hope it's mutual. And thank you very much.
So our guests are, first of all, Krzysztof Kosior. Krzysztof is great-grandson of Witold Pilecki. I think I will ask you, so what you do, who you are. So besides of being great-grandson of Witold Pilecki.
Thank you for having me. Theoretically, I'm a landscape architect, but practically I work in a construction company.
So thank you. And we have also Richard Herzinger. Richard Herzinger is journalist and working for some important German magazines and fan of history.
Of what?
Of history.
History.
Fan of history. Do you like history?
I like to deal with history. I don't know if I like the history. That's a difference.
Depends on history, you know.
Okay.
I like to study it, but I don't read.
Okay, so the title of this conversation is Pilecki, Witness, Hero, and Symbol of Anti-Totalitarianism. And I think we'll start with Krzysztof. So Krzysztof, who is Witold Pilecki for you?
Well, it's my great-grandfather and also someone who I look up to. So I think he really can be a good example of how much you can really achieve if you really want to do something and you believe in yourself. And also, maybe not for me personally, but for us as a family view, is also a guy who went missing for us. This is also something that my grandma passed on in a way at me. Yeah? So it is the story of many people in Poland, in Germany, in England, in many countries, which the war always brings. Yeah, that some people are missing later on, and this is something I feel too.
And because the history of Witold Pilecki was rediscovered in Poland really 20 years ago it started, and how was it? When did you know this story? Was it present in your family? It was taboo in communist time. It was forbidden. How can you tell us something about this?
Yeah, sure. I always knew that there was such a character in the family. It was just very distant for me. So. When I was 10 years old, I thought that 1945, for example, is so far away that I was listening to these stories as something like, I don't know, like 19th century or something, you know, very, very old. Yeah, nice, but not so close to me. And I have rediscovered the guy, Witold Pilecki, I think when I was around 18, maybe 20 years old. So already like 20 years ago, because I'm 40.
And can you say, because when I remember when we were opening this first exhibition. You were always stressing that the most important for you is Pilecki as this person also in pre-war time, that he was, yes, and now, I mean, what is this in his character the most important?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not the most important, but the thing that I always think about, because you can always see Witold generally in uniform as a kind of soldier, but he was also a guy who was really a great father. He was a great, he made so many things we don't really have time, because I could, you know, say all these things, but he was always in his environment with people, and he was helping all these people. I mean, his family, but obviously all the neighbors, and that's the only cause why we are here, because our Belarusian and Polish neighbors saved my great-grandmother when the Red Army came. So they did that because we were liked, yeah, as a family, and we were liked because of Witold Pilecki, I think, the way he was acting. And just a little intro here. I just wanted to say that thank you very much for you know, everyone almost got the flowers already, but really that institute is here and it's co-working with Ukraine and with Belarusian people. It's really important for me, and this is the spirit of Witold Pilecki, I think. And thank you very much that you do that. Really, deep from deep of my heart, because this is the thing we should do together. So
Sukurcze, the manor of Pilecki family, is in today's Belarus. So have you been there? Or?
No. I was, you know, like maybe I will go later, and now I don't think I will come anytime soon, unfortunately.
Ryszard, I mean, you. Who is for you Witold Pilecki? Because probably I think you have discovered him not so long time ago. I mean, probably it is connected with Pilecki Institute, but perhaps not. Can you say something about that?
Okay, I'm not sure I prepared an opening statement, because they told me in the mail to. Should I just?
Yes, of course.
About 5 minutes or something. Okay. Well, I don't know so very much about Pilecki. All I know is from you. But as a symbol, more in general, I have some thoughts with him as a symbol for anti-totalitarianism. So Pilecki stands for uncompromising resistance to both of the two totalitarian systems of the 20th century. And why is it so important to remember this position today? First of all, consistent anti-totalitarianism in the 1930s and 1940s, here we are with history, was a rather rare position, which to maintain against the temptations of authoritarian ideologies from right and left required quite a lot of courage, and political as well as moral steadfastness. The Second World War, you remember, was an anti-Nazi and anti-fascist war, but it was not an anti-totalitarian war. In order to win this war, the Western Allies had to line up with the totalitarian Soviet Union, which benefited immensely from the common triumph over National Socialism as the ultimate menace to humanity. The Soviets were allowed, after the war, were allowed to keep their loot, their territorial loot they had captured as a result of the alliance with Hitler, and enlarged their rule all over Eastern Europe. I'm not saying that there was any chance for the Western democracies to act in any other way than this, but the fact is that there was a high price to pay for this toxic alliance between democracy and totalitarianism. The roots of these mischievements of Western democracies having to join ranks with a totalitarian power to defeat another, even worse one, lay in the appeasement policy of the 1930s, which resulted from a fatal underestimation of the totalitarian danger. This underestimation came from ignoring the warnings of anti-totalitarian thinkers who already had understood the dimension of this terrible threat very early. Only with the Cold War, anti-totalitarianism became something like the official doctrine of Western democracies. But in the 1960s and 70s, the concept was discredited by the left-wing student movement, who suggested the anti-totalitarian theory, or the totalitarianism theory, was an instrument of the reactionary right-wing. This was utterly wrong, since principal thinkers of the theory of totalitarianism, like Carlo Rosselli, Arthur Koestler, Ernst Fraenkel, or Hannah Arendt, just to name some, came from the left, were democratic socialists or left liberals. A revival of anti-totalitarianism occurred in the late 1970s, with a dissident movement in Eastern Europe, namely Poland and Czechoslovakia. What was the essence of this anti-totalitarian thinking? The idea that instead of fighting over what should be the ideal society, while in reality living under totalitarian rule, this struggle should be postponed until there even exist conditions in which ideas can be exchanged at all without fear and intimidation. That human dignity stands above all ideas and ideologies was the core belief of this group of people, the dissidents. In the West, at the same time, a congenial concept was developed by the nouveau philosophe around André Glucksmann and Henri Bernard Lévy. Instead of striving towards an ideal society, they said we should concentrate our efforts on the prevention of the worst inhumanity that could rise up at any time again. Today, we are confronted with a peril of rising new authoritarian and totalitarian powers who, although seemingly sticking to completely antagonistic ideologies, have no fear of contact when it comes to join forces in preparing a world war against the Western liberal world, which they strive to annihilate. Be it the theocracy of Iran, which is driven by the apocalyptic expectation of the world rule of Islam, be it Russia posing as the guardian and savior of the Christian Occident, be it the atheistic horror dictatorship of North Korea, which, however, promoted their worldly leader to a kind of unfailing God, or be it totalitarian China, which keeps its Marxist-Leninist ideology while combining it with an extreme supremacist nationalism and cultural chauvinism. Doesn't matter to them that these aims they are proclaiming are logically totally incompatible. This phalanx has to offer something for all variants of extremism rising up in the crisis-ridden societies of the West today. In order to withstand this immense threat, we have to stand firmly with core values of democracy, of individual freedom and dignity. And that's why we have to remember and honor forerunners like Witold Pilecki, who were ready to fight and even sacrifice their lives for the maintenance of these core values. Thank you.
So thank you. I think that was what was said by Richard. So it's really important. So why we need Witold Pilecki now as an anti-totalitarian symbol? But I want to ask Hania. So Hania is mentioned about the role of Pilecki as a witness. Why is so important the role of Pilecki as a witness?
We remember him, first of all, as an author of Report W. And but we should think deeper about him, about this process of bearing witness. Yes, it's the story about understanding that remembrance, and really he put such an effort to really recall the names of people who were killed. He was making the lists of all collaborators, his co-workers in resistance. He wanted to, he understood that this bearing witness is also acting, is fighting, yes? And somehow because of that, I think our director, I mean, has chosen Pilecki as a patron, that because Pilecki Institute, our main aim is to, in our heart is archive, and in this archive we have collection, huge collection of testimonies of Polish citizens, and we understand that this research and rethinking and giving voice to the, I mean, so many people who bear the witnesses, it's like, I mean, also the kind of justice and acting, and in this meaning Pilecki, this part of his heritage, yes, is, I think, something common. I think it's, you said, Krzysiek, about this experience of missing, yes, but I remember many times in the exhibition or during different events about Pilecki, people came and were saying, I know Pilecki is our great hero, but I can find history of my family in this experience. It's very interesting. I think this, I mean, because absolutely he was extraordinary heroism. I mean, doing all, I mean, so many things, yes, during his life. But this bearing witness is in the central, I think, this, what we think about him, is the central of his history.
Thank you. So I would add maybe some reflections on Pilecki as a hero, and probably the problems we can have with taking the story, with having this story about the heroes, and in particular about Pilecki. So we often hear that we live now in post-heroic societies. So even more often we hear it here in Germany, in Berlin. So I don't know. So if you agree with me, Richard, but for many historical reasons, there is a much skepticism towards heroism here in Berlin. I mean that heroes are something which is fundamentally not in the zeitgeist of our time. And I'm not German, but Polish, but I also grew up in a culture of ironic distance towards heroism. So I have some problems with heroism. So that I read, for example, Sławomir Mrożek and such irony that heroism is something wrong, really. So that so this is somewhat problematic. But I really think that we must learn how to appreciate heroism even in our post-heroic democracies with their post-heroic dispositions. I wanted to add here, even in this post-heroic times, but of course, so the Russian war against Ukraine puts a question mark at this phrase. So first, why we need heroism is because we need values. And it was mentioned by both of you. And heroism exactly requires values. A hero acts for the sake of values, not for the self-interest. He acts for the common good. And the idea of sacrifice is something which is very beautiful, but also quite problematic for us. And there's also the problem I see that the hero, in a sense, needs the public. And the problem was with Pilecki that Pilecki didn't have this public very long time. So during the Cold War, and this audience, there was a lack of this audience. The hero is somehow always socially constructed. So the zeitgeist is changing, new generations have new and different heroes. And Pilecki didn't have this audience of his own throughout the Cold War. And I think the question is to Krzysiek. So do you think that what is the audience? What is the social construction of the persona of Pilecki now? So you observe it from the point of view of your family experience, and what is most important message for you?
Whoa. The most important message from the Witold story, I think it's truth and love. But this sounds a little bit like, I don't know, Beatles song. But it's true, yeah? So he was fighting for the truth, and that's some hope for Ukraine once again, yes? I think the truth prevails, even if it takes lots of time. And the story of Witold, it was like, for me, it was like a small, very small thing that only few people knew about. Then it grew up, and it was addressed in Poland, I guess. Now it's getting out in the world, in Europe and in the whole world. Thanks to many people. I won't name them now because I don't have time, but I'm very grateful. But yeah, that's, if we want to just squeeze Witold, I think there are 2 drops of love and truth. That's it.
So thank you. So that I think we can see also at the exhibition. So the Pilecki is a human being, and paradox is that heroes shine and humanity doesn't shine. We admire heroes precisely because they don't represent this conventional humanum. But, for example, on the display, on the exhibition here, so you can look at the letters of Witold Pilecki to his children, letters of a father trying to regain closeness with his children. And this multi-perspectivity is something fascinating too.
I think it's a huge, occasion for perhaps someone would like to comment or ask the question, because we invented very quick these talks, and now there will be another topic, but perhaps I would like to give a chance if someone would like.
I will just add that being a father is also something that is really important for me, and I think we can learn, all of us, from Witold.
Yeah, thank you. So somebody would like to ask? So Richard.
A little remark, yeah. For me, the real heroes, or a real hero, is someone who does not want to be a hero. He is someone who is just wants to do what has to be done because he couldn't live otherwise if he wouldn't do it. And then people who are projecting this heroism into these people, but they themselves don't want to be heroes. But for me, it's the Ukrainians today are really the example for heroism. You know, that's exactly what a guy like Zelensky represents. He doesn't want to be a hero. He don't want to be the greatest leader of all times. He's just acting in the name of the people who trust him to defend them, and he represents them. That's another very important criteria, I think, for a democratic heroism, that the hero represents the whole will of the people, you know, that he is a part of the people, he is not something exceptional. And I guess that this definition also applies to Pilecki. I don't think he did all these things because he thought, I want to be a hero. Just did it because it had to be done.
I think
Thank you very much.
Very true.
Yes, I think there's only one more point I would see is that that Pilecki was the man from the bottom of the resistance network, from the grassroots of the Polish underground state, and he was not king, general, or god, so as the heroes like to be, and I think this is in that sense the history of the man who volunteered and from the very grassroots of the broader network of resistance in Poland. So there is also the good symbol for democratic times too.
Thank you very much. And we start the next Thank you, Krzysztof Kosio, Richard Herzinger, and now we will invite Jack Fairweather
and Piotr Długołęcki. Piotr and Jack Fairweather.
Panie Piotrze, zapraszamy.
Max, Jack Fairweather tam jest?
Mateusz, może zacznijcie, a ja znajdę Jacka, żeby nie...
So Hania will go to find Jack, and I will introduce Piotr Długołęcki. Piotr is historian, and he works for the Polish Institute of International Affairs in Warsaw. And who is Piotr is editor of this volume, among other things. So he is editor of the volume Confronting the Holocaust, Documents of the Polish Government in Exile, Policy Concerning Jews in 1939-1945. I mentioned this book because it is a quite important thing. So the very fundamental volume incorporating all the documents found in archives related to the role of Polish government in exile, Polish diplomatic mission during the war, trying to help or trying to describe the Holocaust and trying to inform, to report on the Holocaust in the world. And I think this is, we have also, we have two guests, because Piotr, as I mentioned, is the specialist, is an expert in this matter of government in exile and how Polish diplomatic missions acted or co-acted in regard to reporting on the Holocaust. And Jack Fairweather is the author of the book on the biography or the book monography on Witold Pilecki, and in particular on Witold Pilecki mission and activities, founding the resistance networks in Auschwitz. And one of the aims of this resistance networks was collection of data, of intelligence, of information, describing one of the main places of the Holocaust, and how. So we have two perspectives. Who wants to start?
Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. So I think probably a good place to start with is Pilecki's mission to Auschwitz, which is how I came across his story in 2015, was reading a review of the first translation of his report from 1945 about the camp into English. And that in itself is a story I'm sure we'll touch on at a later point, how it was that one of the main witnesses to the horrors of Auschwitz did not feature in any sort of English language source material for 60 plus years. I came across this remarkable idea that there was a man who volunteered to put himself in harm's way in Auschwitz in order to report on the crimes of the Nazis in the camp. And that set me off on a 5-year journey trying to understand what would make a man leave his family, leave his friends, leave the underground cell in Warsaw that he'd helped build in order to be imprisoned in a place like Auschwitz. So to set the scene for this incredible act of bravery, which I think we could all agree is one of the greatest acts of courage of the Second World War, I'd like to give you a bit of perspective, which is to describe to you what was happening in Poland in 1940 on the eve of Pilecki's mission beginning. And that's really to describe to you a country that had been occupied almost a year by German forces. It was a place where Hitler's racial vision for Europe first found its most brutal and horrible endpoint. It was the place where he put a lot of the theories that he'd begun to practice in Germany into devastating effect in Poland by ghettoizing the country's Jews, by attacking and killing Poland's intelligentsia and professional class, and really anyone who could stand up to this racial vision that of the Germans. And this was a time in the war in 1940 when America was not engaged in the fighting. Hitler's forces had swept through Western Europe. Only the UK, Great Britain, was still resisting Hitler, but it seemed that even that resistance might not last for long, as it was at the time of the Battle of Britain was just beginning, and there was an expectation that soon German forces would be landing in Britain. So this was really the direst point of the war, and Polish forces had, after their devastating defeat at the hands of the German military in September 1939, had fallen back into an underground, which Pilecki was an early member of. And their very first job was just to find like-minded people who were prepared to stand up to this occupation. And Pilecki's first job in the underground was as a recruiter of army officers, but also of anyone really who would take a stand. And it became clear to the Polish underground as it began to constitute itself that they also were alone in the middle of Europe, living through this terrible occupation. And what they needed to do was inform the world, to remind the world that Poland still existed, tell the world about what was happening in the streets of Warsaw, the ghettoization, the murders, and that became a primary focus of the Polish underground. So it was that when news began to reach Warsaw that a new concentration camp had been built in Auschwitz, what the Germans called Auschwitz, outside the small Polish city of Oswiecim, they wanted to find out more, to understand what was being done in the camp in order to tell the world of some new chapter of the German occupation. And they turned to Pilecki in that moment to get himself arrested, and in a roundup, which was over the summer of 1940, relatively common, and he got tipped off by the Polish underground that there would be a series of arrests in the Żoliborz district of Warsaw, and so he sat in an apartment building where he knew the German forces would be arriving shortly, and got himself arrested and sent to Auschwitz. And the camp he discovered was not the camp that we all know from Schindler's List, and not the camp of the mass destruction of Europe's Jews. That was to come, and what it was the most brutal concentration camp yet in Germany's steadily mounting descent into genocide, a place of unbelievable brutality, starvation rations, forced labor, and Pilecki realized that, first of all, he had to survive the camp, but then also that he needed to start reporting on it. And I'd like to hand over to Piotr now, because he can set us up with the story of what was happening outside the camp.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for invitation and for organization this nice opportunity to exchange opinion, and of course congratulations on your Geburtstag. Happy birthday. Talking about the Polish government's policy towards Jews, we have to remember that the Polish government was in completely unique and exceptional situation comparing to the other European countries and government. Pre-war Poland had a biggest population of Jewish minority. Even in Warsaw, in Polish capital, lived more Jewish citizens than in whole France, and many Polish villages and cities had a bigger Jewish population than some Western European countries. And of course, as we know, the crime of Holocaust was also committed mostly on the territory of occupied Poland, and many of the victims of Holocaust were Polish citizenship. As a result, the activity of the Polish government was more intensive than the activity of the other governments and other politicians and other diplomatic service, and many sources, many testimonies, reports, notes, memos was created in a Polish language, and all those things had put the Polish government during the war in very specific position. And of course, the Polish government, talking about Polish government, I mean not only prime minister and ministries, but whole Polish apparatus, also the president, also the whole diplomatic and consular service, also the Polish army, and also the national council, the quasi parliament existing on exile in London. And Polish government receiving many documents, many materials about the Holocaust committed on the Polish occupied territory, and first of all, of course, received documents created by the Polish underground, Polish Home Army, Polish conspiracy on the territory of occupied Poland, sent by radio as a ciphers or cable, and brought to London by couriers. Many information also Polish government and Polish diplomats received from citizens of neutral countries who visited occupied Poland and brought some observations about the atrocities. Sometimes also Polish diplomats received information from citizens of countries which were allied with Germany, with from Axis country. For example, Polish ambassador in Vatican in Holy See, Kazimierz Papé, submitted on the October 1942 a very important note to the Holy See, to the Secretary of State in Vatican, informing about gross action, about liquidation of Warsaw Ghetto, and information he received from the citizens from Axis country. Probably there is no stated in this note, but probably from citizen of Italy. Apart from those situations, very often Polish diplomats received information about Holocaust from refugees, Polish and Jewish refugees who managed to escape from occupied Poland. For example, Polish envoy in Madrid received information from Polish refugees about the liquidation of ghettos in Sandomierz, in Kielce, in Lublin. Very often Polish consuls in Palestine, in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem received some information about atrocities from Jewish refugees who managed to escape from Poland. It's good to remember that to the October 1940 it was possible legally to emigrate from Poland, even for people of Jewish origin. The problem was, of course, to find a country which wanted to receive this kind of refugees, and very often also Polish government received information from the Jewish organization, in occupied Poland, as well as from Jewish organization abroad. It's worth to mention the letter of the sent by politicians of the Bund. The letter was written in April 1942 and sent to London in May 1942. And in the letter was mentioned that in Poland 700,000 Jewish citizens were murdered. And generally speaking, the attitude to this number was very specific. People generally didn't believe that it is possible, and even we have some notes written by Polish diplomats with talks with some Jewish representative in London. It's possible to find information that even Jewish delegates didn't believe that it's possible, and they suggested not to use this number. So the information about the Holocaust were received by Polish government, Polish diplomat from several different roads, and were collected by Polish government and when transmitted to other parties. But maybe about this process I will say in the second part of our discussion. So maybe I will stop here.
Thank you, Hania.
So the question is, did these Pilecki reports, did this all these diplomatic efforts, did they succeed? I mean, how can you, in the end, I mean, what resonance in the world did they have?
And what would you name or call success? What is success in that regard?
Well, maybe I could partly answer that question by describing to you how Pilecki got his first report out of the camp and its impact. And that's to take you back to these early months of Auschwitz, when it was this brutal concentration camp. Pilecki was a prisoner and needed to survive, but also start reaching out to other prisoners to see if they could form some form of resistance in order to describe the terrible conditions in the camp. And it is just worth thinking about what Auschwitz was like, these daily roll calls where they would meet up, and there were about 5,000–6,000 prisoners in the camp. In the autumn, winter of 1940, there was already about 100 prisoners dying a week in Auschwitz from malnutrition, from violence meted out on them by camp guards. They were all emaciated, terrified for their lives, and this was the context in which Pilecki learned that there was a Polish prisoner who was to be released, a fairly rare occurrence in the camp's history, and he had the man memorize a report. He couldn't write anything down, obviously, in those conditions, and he had the man promise to go and visit the underground in Warsaw at a special address in order to relay that information. And I think one of the most exciting parts in my research for the book was in discovering this report, because I think for many years people had assumed that because it was an oral report that it wasn't ever written down. And it was in 2017 that a researcher of mine, Marta Golian, in London, managed to track down a single folder which contained the story of how this report was first of all transcribed in Warsaw and then smuggled out of the country across occupied Europe to reach the Polish underground in London. And she read to me the report over the phone because it actually quotes the witness of the prisoner suffering in the camp, who was, of course, Pilecki, and it's this desperate plea for the Allies to bomb Auschwitz, because what Pilecki had discerned in those just a few weeks in the camp was that it was on a trajectory of evil and darkness, and it had to be stopped at all costs. Even if that bombing of the camp meant that the prisoners themselves would lose their lives, it would be worth it. So just an extraordinary statement, clear-sighted statement by Pilecki from the camp that found its way all the way across occupied Europe to the Polish underground leadership in London, and they handed it on to the head of Bomber Command, a guy called Charles Portal, to ask, can you send a bombing raid to attack Auschwitz? And this was in January 1941. So this is a year before and more before the Holocaust, as we understand it, began in Auschwitz. It's when the vast majority of the camp's million victims were still alive. It's a really agonizing moment because, of course, no action was taken. So to answer your question, Hannah, how do we judge whether that first report was a success? It didn't lead to the horrors of the camp ending, but of course, when we consider the extraordinary bravery of Pilecki in compiling that report, in his messenger, Alexander Wielopolski, bringing it to Warsaw, the couriers who then brought it to London, it's this remarkable story of courage and daring to try and warn the world. But of course, it was the Allies who didn't pay heed.
So it means that Polish government and the Polish underground state succeed in collecting testimonies and evidence of crime. But what did something happen more? Can we mention any successes in this meaning that, I don't know, Germans something had to change or were threatened or
the Polish government made a huge effort to make all those information public. One of the most important and most famous documents created by the Polish government is a so-called note of Count Raczyński, the Polish ambassador in London and chief of the Polish Foreign Ministry, and in December 1942, he distributed a note describing all atrocities. As a result, the countries, the members, the countries who signed the Atlantic Charter, of course, submitted a special appeal to stop the atrocities and to punish the war criminals. And during the whole war, the Polish government tried to inform about the Holocaust, tried to appeal about the stopping the crime, and made a huge effort to gather the evidence for the trials for war criminals after the war, and on the end of the war, there is possible also to see some kind of competition between the Polish government on exile, which of course cooperated with the United Nations Commission of War Criminals, and it was competition between the Polish authorities, Polish communist authorities created in Soviet Union, because Red Army invading Poland, of course, liberating also the Nazi concentration camps, gathering some evidence, and it was possible to observe some rivalry between Polish government and communist government. However, those documents received and prepared by Polish government in exile and Polish diplomatic post and consular post, of course, were used during the process. However, it's really very important also to make. It was very important to make those information public, because Polish government tried and appealed also to many neutral countries to give permission to some also Jewish refugees to enter the countries and find asylum in some safe place. So all those information about the Holocaust, which were also used to convince some politicians and diplomats in neutral countries to increase the quota of visas for Jewish refugees. To some extent, the information about authorities were used to save those people who was possible to save. However, of course, everything depended on the situation on the front, and it was impossible to stop Großaktion because the Warsaw was under the German occupation, and it was no possible to win the war 3 years earlier.
I think it's worth just adding that, of course, we think of places like Auschwitz are very central to our collective humanity in understanding both the war and, of course, what we as humans can do to one another. That perspective is one that we have earned through decades of scholarship and indeed from those very first reports from the Polish underground. But that's with the benefit of hindsight. I think back in war-torn London in 1941, it wasn't clear that Auschwitz was to become this central node in our consciousness. So it was difficult to pass through all of these reports from the Polish underground and also from Jewish underground and groups and from multiple sources. There was a general sense among Allied policymakers of that bad things were happening, but of course they became overwhelmed. And there's that quote you alluded to, Piotr, about when the Bund sent, a Jewish organization in Poland sent a report that 700,000 Jews had been killed so far. That was received in London by the Polish underground and said, if you had said it was 70,000, people might actually believe you, but 700,000 is just, no one can comprehend that, maybe whether or not it's true or not. And that's, of course, that famous quote by the US Supreme Court Justice Frankfurter, who said to Jan Karski, a Polish underground messenger, I can understand what you're saying when you just tell me about these acts of genocide in Poland, but I can't believe you because it's simply beyond our comprehension. And that is the crux of this question about whether did Pilecki succeed, did the Polish underground succeed? They ran up against this, the same horror I think we today still face. I mean, I think everyone in this room will have thought about the Holocaust and struggle to comprehend how 6 million people were killed. And I think what's so incredible about Pilecki is that, of course, he was there in the camp, having one of the first witnesses, one of the first to comprehend how it was possible, and the tragedy of his story, of the story of the Polish underground, is that not enough people came to see the camp as he did. And, it's taken us years and years, decades, to have that same vision as Pilecki.
Yeah, finishing this conversation, I would direct our attention to the point of just after the war. So because in year 1947, there was the big conference in Paris with some survivors of Auschwitz, among other Primo Levi and other well-known prisoners of Auschwitz, and also witness to what happened in Auschwitz. At that time, Pilecki was in prison. At that time, so Pilecki was silenced by the Polish government, so by the communist government, and probably all the effort, if we measure this effort done during the war, we also have to include some efforts, so continuation or follow-up of these efforts just after the war. And unfortunately, because of the Cold War, because of the repression, so among other things on Pilecki, there was not possibility to further complete these reports by Pilecki just after the wars.
perhaps someone would like to ask the question. Is now this very short moment, and if not, okay, it's.
Is there any journalism institutes in Poland which are carrying the name of Pilecki, because he's like the idol of journalism?
So.
As far as I know, we are the first institution in Poland named by his name. So,
and we have special award. A special award for war correspondents every year. So with Auschwitz Museum is together every year we award the best war correspondents, I mean books written by war correspondents. And, Jack?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to say, I mean, it was, yeah, I had the privilege of meeting Pilecki's two children who are still alive and speaking to them of their experience of the loss of their father, who was arrested and then put on a show trial and executed in 1947 because he continued to fight on against the communist takeover of Poland. And it's always a moving moment. Andrzej Pilecki, his son, described to me how they were in their school classroom when on the tannoy system it was announced that Pilecki, a traitor to the people, imperialist agent, had been executed. And they spent the next many decades being told that their father was an enemy of the state, which is absolutely incomprehensible to anyone who has sort of encountered this remarkable man's story. And it's a real privilege to be here this evening in the Pilecki Institute and to see this wonderful exhibition. So thank you, Magda, and thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Mateusz, for putting it all together.
Thank you, Piotr. Thank you. Also, concluding our discussion, I would like to underline one thing. Very often historians or researchers who are focused on the history of the Holocaust are not doing research in diplomatic files. And it's also very, very important to remember that in diplomatic records, that documents created by diplomatic and consular service, it's possible to find many documents, many testimonies, many notes, many cables, many circulars about the crime of the Holocaust. So I think it's very important to remember also about this part of sources. And I recommend to use it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the last, thank you, Jack. Thank you, Piotr. And the last conversation in 3 minutes, we start the conversation, the last one tonight, with Magda Gawin, director of the Pilecki Institute in Warsaw, and Andrii Portnow, the professor of history at the Viadrina University.
I even say right now we'll start because I checked.
We right now. Andrii?
Tak od razu.
Magda?
Pani profesor?
I think with this last conversation, we have some convenient beginning of this conversation because we have in fact the question, the title, maybe not in this form which was in the program, but the question is, what does it mean never again this year? Magda.
Never again. I was taught that never again means that war never happened in Europe. But 2 years ago, nearly, we were witness of Russian attacks against Ukraine, and it was like a nightmare for my generation. I think that we should rethink few questions. First of all, why Pilecki is very important for me, and why I'm interested in the history of Second World War and the occupation. And I started my professional career as a social historian, and I like social history, especially those kind of social history which understands politics and not ignore the level of politics. And I think that we can prevent against the war and we can express never again if we understand politics, if we not ignore. And now I think that the social history turned in the other way and is very postmodernistic also, neglected some historical tools, and because of that, a lot of people don't understand politics, and this is the problem with us as European societies. And my favorite writer and historian is Gertrude Himmelfarb, and she wrote a very impressive collective works entitled Looking into Abyss, and it shaped me, and she is my teacher. And so the problem is, in my opinion, with the intellectual life. So I share point of view presented by Richard Herzinger, that we need to come back to the political philosopher, which was, I mean, the testimonies of that intellectuals like Hannah Arendt, Zbigniew Brzeziński, were after the experience of the Second World War. And I observed, for example, and this is the symbol, what happened in Europe at universities and intellectual life, that even if language of diplomacy, the term totalitarianism was completely marginalized, was completely wiped. Diplomats used to say regime is not the same, is not the same. And if we neglected the intellectual testimonies of Hannah Arendt, of Brzeziński and the others, we are not able to understand Europe, 20th century, and also the future. I'm sure that it was possible to avoid the war against Ukraine. But we failed. And now there is a duty to rethink 20th century and to come back to the political philosophy. I want to add something, that the history of Witold Pilecki is not a history. All we understand when we are talking about history, in fact, we are talking about the present time and the future. And thanks to the story about Pilecki, which is for me also personal story, and usually I also think about Maria Pilecka. She was extraordinary woman. She was not a flower. She was very, very brave also, because she was completely alone with a 2 children in very dangerous place. She agreed with Witold to be separated with him, because she understood that Witold made good decision. But also thanks to the experience and thanks to my interest of the Second World War, when Russians attacked Ukraine, 2 days later, I set up Lemkin Center. And as far as I know, we are the only state institution in Europe collecting testimonies and video records documenting Russian crimes. Because, thank you. Yes, so this is also the knowledge, how ask people what is the difference between testimonies under oath, and without oath, why we should documenting Russian crimes, not only for a hack, because it's the most important is to collect testimonies without oath, which will be foundation for writers, for journalists, for historians, and those kind of sources will be not classified. This is also very important. So the whole knowledge came from my historical interest, and if I, as a historian, could help people who live with us in Europe, who are refugees, who left their families on Ukraine, or who fight against Russians, I think that I fulfill my duty as a European, as a scholar, and as somebody who think that the history is not past. I think that the history, as I declared, is our present time and future. So.
Yeah, dear colleagues, so first of all, of course, I have to say that I'm very happy being here. I'm very grateful to Hania and Mateusz for this invitation. It's hard now to believe for me, but today in the morning I've been kind of far away in Regensburg, so in Bavaria. And actually, one of the reasons why I decided, of course, to go was this chance to meet and even to talk in public again with Magda, because accidentally, maybe, I don't know, we've met many years ago in Warsaw, and
20.
Who would believe 20 years ago, right, that at some point there will be such an institute, right, and I'll be in Berlin. It was not planned at all. My plans were completely different. Now, I think first of all, I should support this point that we all, let's use this term, kind of failed to imagine the possibility of a war in Europe, or if one wishes, a war for such a scale in Europe. You know, I was born in the year of '79. It's the year when the Soviet Union started aggression in Afghanistan. I remember, for instance, some of my school teachers, they were guys who returned from the front. So from Afghanistan, and for instance, my teacher of physics, he was the guy with this military experience, and for me it was something very strange indeed, something like the stories of my grandfathers, yeah. And now it's the stories of my friends, relatives, family members. So that's something really, it's never. So never is actually never. Never is never, because history has no ending. In a sense, at least, as you know, some our American and other colleagues believe. And now I think we are in a very interesting situation, because it's too early and too naive, in my view, to say that we already kind of knew or could presume how the history would develop, let's say, in the nearest future. Yeah, so it very much depends on, of course, the war against Ukraine, but also, let's say, on the global context. Yeah, so how different parts of the world react to it, and what will happen also economically, socially, culturally, and so on. So we live in interesting times, but also dangerous times, in times of difficult choices. And in this sense, of course, Pilecki again is kind of a relevant figure. Yeah, it's an example of a person who made certain choices. And those choices, okay, costed his life, no less. So it's very serious. And that's exactly what's happening in Ukraine now, when people are decided to, go to the army, to participate in different types of activities. Also here, and maybe I should also say that, to use this occasion to thank again Pilecki Institute for all this incredible support for Ukraine, because I remember coming first time, maybe the first months of this full-scale war, and I was amazed how all this stuff was located here, and helping people in Ukraine, helping the front. It's really important. It's really important, and it's something that we should keep in mind all the time. And so all those expectations, actually very noble expectations, let's be frank about it, very noble, because this phrase, never again, it came out of a very noble idea that let's make an evil like National Socialism impossible for the future. They somehow it's understandably again, overlook the fact that history is never the same, and totalitarian regimes or genocides, they're never the same. They have some common features that could be traced back also historically, but they're never like literally the same. So we should be kind of prepared, also intellectually prepared, mentally prepared to acknowledge the new forms of genocide, of violation of human rights, and so on. Then history works also nowadays. If no, then it's like a purely, exercise that makes no relevance for the tasks of the day.
I like very much everything what was told. Perhaps someone would like to ask the question and join this philosophical talk about is it possible never again. I have the feeling, especially in Germany, that this never again is somehow the cover for this expecting of peace that it's such a slogan which covers need of justice, need of understanding who is the perpetrator, who is a victim. And this never again, that sometimes, perhaps this is what Magda said about this understanding of politics. Sometimes I think it's something else, that I realize that there is very popular running the, in field of history, that people prefer culture of remembrance than studying history. And I think this is the problem, because it's not the question how we remember a lot of stuff, but what happened, and especially what did happen, how did it happen. And I think these questions, I don't know when did it happen that people stopped to ask these questions, yes? And really prefer to, in shop of souvenirs to watch these different, things that are these objects of culture of remembrance. But it's not, what is, and I think the Polish history is the example, how we deal with it, with these bad things about Poles and these good things that in these very typical Polish discussions, like Jedwabny and Pilecki, but it's not, both these stories were discovered so late, yes, in this meaning that it's like, and what is the question behind? It's the researching, studying history. Yes, and if we stop on the culture of remembrance, there's really nothing.
I think that, if I may add something, I think that very often the cultural left wing accused more conservative, traditional, modest historian like me, that about Machiavellic attempts to hide the truth. I love it. It's so often that we want to hide something. What we want to hide? Nothing. And I think that I would like to also recall to the one very important biography from Leszek Kołakowski. He is a well-known Polish philosopher. He emigrated from communist Poland to Great Britain, and he did great career. And he was in a very strong conflict with his students in 1968 in Great Britain at Oxford University, because at the time British students really expressed that Western societies are very oppressive and they live like in concentration camps. And after the Polish experience, Kołakowski tried to desperately explain them. You are wrong. The Western societies is not oppressive. You don't know the history of Middle Eastern Europe, yes? And we still continue such a discussion even in Poland with the left wing. So be honest, when I recall to the political thinking, it's not only about history, it's about imagination, with the understanding politics, with the difference between the regime and the democratic societies. And this is absolutely normal, that when we conduct, I don't know, political debates, that the political parties express different things, but we all still live in democracy. And what happened in Belarus? Look, this is the regime. This is people who really sometimes, they can say that they live in concentration camp because they are treated terribly in prison, etc. So I would like to say that we still need more understanding of politics, first of all, and the second of political philosophy, and the third question I completely forgot. Let me let me remind, because I would like to say something important at the end. Mateusz, 1 minute. 1 minute. I think that the never again is a slogan which is repeated thousands, millions of times by different groups of people at the ceremonies. And we need it because all people need to feel safe, yes? Never again, it means I am a good man. I respect human rights, for example, yes? But in a fact, when we follow to the historical information of Polish underground about what happened in Poland, about concentration camp, death camp, I'm sorry, but Western society, I mean our allies knew everything. And the problem is with the passivity, because it's very difficult to force people to not to be passive. And this is the political problem. The state administration is very similar all over the world, and they take care about those days, tomorrow, maybe 2 days, but nobody think about the future. So we suffer from a lack of determination of political leaders, yes? We suffer from lack of political braveness and to prevent really bad things. Now all we understand the threat from the China, from Russia. We are not sure what really happened for 5 or 10 years because we don't want to think about it. And the ability to understand politics, it's mean to have some kind of ability to face with the danger, yes, and to prevent them. So I wish all of you to be very brave because I think that the time is very difficult for Europe and maybe for the world. So it's pessimistic, but maybe it's also a little bit optimistic because I still believe that in Europe there is a lot of people of goodwill and among politicians as well who understand it. And this is my hope.
Andriy made it possible that at Viadrina University will be Ukrainian Polish Center, and it's perhaps also, I mean, something which I think it's this focus on to also to understand Ukrainian perspective in Germany. It's also perhaps this thinking about how to make it in Germany possible that people will start to understand East European history, culture,
and politics.
And then it's...
Andriy.
Okay, so first of all, let me be correct here. So it's not just me, it's my university colleagues. First of all, my dearest colleague, professor of economic history, Dagmara Yeshnia-Kvast, and also our new president, Professor Eduard Müller, and finally the Senate of the university. It was again like a very, I would say, as you rightly said, dear Han, it was a very brave decision to establish this Viadrina Center of Polish and Ukrainian Studies. Actually, dear colleagues, let me use this occasion to invite all of you, absolutely seriously, all of you who have time and interest to attend our opening ceremony. It will take place on the last day of autumn, so the 30th of November, It will be Thursday, 4 p.m. Seriously, like all of you are warmly welcomed in Frankfurt Oder. And don't forget that our university is a unique one because it is literally located on both sides of the Oder River, so in Germany and in Poland, right? So Frankfurt Oder and Słubice. And now, think about this interrelation, because unfortunately, again, unfortunately, in the German context, it's something rather new. I mean, bringing Poland and Ukraine together. Not Ukraine and some other countries, I will not give their names, but Ukraine and Poland together. You know, when I first published my small book, a brochure, Ukraine and Poland, Entangled Histories, Asymmetric Memories, in English and in German, I've realized, it was a big surprise to me actually, I've realized that unfortunately, till now, we have no books in German that took those two conscious countries, societies, whatever, together and look at them on the entangled ways. So, we have very good books about Polish-German relations, about Russian-German relations, Russian-Polish, like, name it, like, you could make the list, but not Polish-Ukrainian. And it's amazing because, like, again, if you look back at the, you know, early modern times, right? Rzecz Pospolita, Boygonrodov, and the entire story around it. Then also modern history, and and very modern history, and contemporary history, it's what we really need. So in this sense, I hope we'll see, but I do hope that this center will somehow promote this knowledge and this entanglement, this understanding, of course, with in cooperation with the Pilecki Institute, that's for sure. And maybe, I don't know, should I say it? Maybe it's too late for such serious points, but okay, let me still make it, otherwise you'll feel that you're not like wasted your time listening to us. You know, dear colleagues, in recent weeks, I've talked to many Ukrainian and Polish friends of mine who work in Germany, who lives in Germany, who publish in Germany, and they've noticed something actually very, on the one hand, troubling, on the other hand, challenging. So let us be frank about it. Trouble is also a challenge. Yeah, you could like use it to do something better. That's what is our plan actually. So they've noticed that look and read. They said look and read. It's not that like empathy or the amount of attention or help is declining for Ukraine now. It is also a situation when different types of Ukrainian cultural, academic, you know, cinematic, theatrical, name it, projects, they're actually now more or less available. Maybe not always enough, but still available like here. But we have an evident deficit of interest. So lack of language, lack of interaction, lack of this Bereitschaft, yeah, to learn from Ukrainian experience. And that's a fascinating question, like why so? Like what blocks it? What is the trouble around it? Like why it's so difficult? And again, you know, I was surprised myself how many books about Ukraine could be found in German if you look back into publication from the Cold War era or interwar period or even 19th century. Now I'm collecting them at home, like for some library later on. But those books are not used, they are not read, they are not critically reflected upon all the time. So in other words, what I'm trying to say, in many talks to German politicians or my university colleagues, I hear this point that, yeah, like the biggest issue is the lack of transfer. Like you have, like you should to transfer your knowledge about Ukraine properly and it will be okay. I'm saying, for sure, that's what we're doing every day. The same goes to Poland or to Croatia or to many other countries in East Central Europe. But a bigger problem is that even if you do transfer quite often, there is no readiness or interest to receive it. There is a kind of, you know, it goes like in different directions, like that. And so how to bring those parallel worlds together, entangled, that's the biggest challenge for our center, for me, myself, and I'm afraid also for Pilecki Institute.
I wanted to say that this is also our experience, yes, that probably, I have feeling that about Poland and Polish culture, history, there are really, I mean, when I visit bookshops, yes, I see how few books I can find and how many these gaps are in also, I mean, what is accessible to get this knowledge. But I think the answer is what you are saying, that is also lack of interest, because it's like, and how to change it, we are here for, it's our birthday, so let's start to celebrate after this talk and not to finish this talk too pessimistic. I think there are many things that were succeed. Magda, yes, Magda, statement. You have last statement.
With the microphone. Okay. Andriy, I would like to use the opportunity and to ask you publicly, what is your reaction that in 2022, Bundestag and European Parliament accepted Holodomor as a genocide? Why is, what is your comments, what is your opinions about it? In 2022, Holodomor stopped to be too controversial issue. So.
I've made this comment once in my big talk in the Center for Refugee and Replacements. I could say it again. It's a purely political decision that has nothing to do with the new knowledge about the Holodomor. Again, let us be frank about it. If you look at the, let's say, amount of books or like statistical data, whatever, like call it, exhibitions, right, about the Great Famine in Soviet Ukraine, we see no big difference between 22 and, name it, 19, 18, 17. And if you compare, and actually we should do it as scholars, absolutely. If you compare the reaction to the campaign by Ambassador Melnik, who is not ambassador anymore, to recognize Holodomor a couple of years ago, yeah, and what happened in 2022, we'll immediately see that this decision was a direct response to current events of the war. And that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about how perceptions of history are constructed by the changing today's situation. So again, it was not about new knowledge on the events in Soviet Ukraine, but it was the reaction to the new political situation in Europe. Now, I've written a piece about Holodomor to be published soon in German, more or less about this, and you could read it in detail, how I'm kind of explaining why it happened and so.
So if you have a time, I recommend you write an interesting article about the recognition in 2022, something which was very obvious. And I'd like to remind all of you that during the 50s in Massachusetts, Lemkin gave a lecture and he put the thesis that the Holodomor is a pure example of genocide. And so, but still for many, many decades, the Holodomor was too controversial. But this issue reflects generally the attitudes towards the Middle Eastern Europe. First of all, West Europeans think that the Middle Eastern Europe is boring. It's boring. So it's not recognized. This is like a worse version of Western Europe. Of course, it is not true. And for Paul, it's very difficult. The question of the war on Ukraine is very difficult because for us it was really shock because Poland warned against Russia, yes, informed Western societies to be cautious because Russia is aggressive imperial state and nobody wants to listen. On the other hand, the question with the reception of the war on Ukraine among Poles is that we as Poles, first time in history, not fight against Russia. We not must, defend ourselves, but Ukrainians fight with them. So it means that the history, I would like to say, changed for us because for 300 years we have experienced very intimate, very brutal, very terrible with Russia. And I think that we couldn't forget about the war and because it's the only way to analyze what, caused the war to avoid other political mistakes. And this is the responsibility for all of us.
I would like to to thank you. So I think we have to finish, but it doesn't mean that we have to finish our talks and conversations. We can continue them in foyer
and outside here.
So this is something I want to mention in regard of what was said. For example, about Holodomor, that we in Pilecki Institute, we, for example, recorded the seminar with Serhii Plochi, so the Ukrainian historian who talked about Holodomor. Another remark is that because this talk or this conversation about the narrative of nie wieder or never again was quite pessimistic, but I would just like to say that in fact, the very fact that in Germany was possible this narrative of never again was because of the Nuremberg. So the Nuremberg trial enabled some type of culture of remembrance, and which wasn't in fact in Russia. So in Soviet Union, and we need probably, so in order to have any maybe partly effective narrative of nie wieder, of never again, in regard to Russia's crimes, we must have any form of Nuremberg for Russia, for Russian crimes, for Russian aggressors. And I think this is probably also pessimistic, but
yes, I want to comment.
I would like to thank you, and I would like to wish you please enjoy. Anya.
I just wanted to say pessimistic in this meaning that how to make it, yes, in how to make it that there will be Nuremberg for Russia. So, okay, I mean, so thank you very much. If anyone has questions, we are here, and let's start our conversations with wine outside in foyer. Thank you very much.